I think that's a very, very good question, actually. And thank you for having me. All foresight studies is about, in a way, a form of educated guess. And I think one of the things you need to take into account when you do that kind of educated guesswork is really that you look into what is the aim you want to achieve, and which are the best ways to get there for the most people. Now we can always, there will always be more than one way to achieve an aim, but I think that any foresight study ought to take into account that what you want to achieve is something which is for the common good. So you have to, in a way, exclude possibilities or approaches which are not in the interest of the common good, but which only serve either government or industry or other actors that can have an interest in using, for instance, artificial intelligence in certain ways. You need to look into what is the common good from a more objective point of view, and that should drive your approach to your foresight study. It's always difficult to know about the future, but what we can, I think, start from the point that if something can go wrong, it is very likely to go wrong down the road. And that's why you should have a kind of a worst case scenario you should work on, and then try to see how you can adapt your policies in such a way that the worst case scenario does not take place. And that, on the other hand, what you would like to be, you will never be able to have a fully best case scenario, but something that approaches the best case scenario, what that actually you are trying to, in your policies, to actively take that into account and use that as a kind of how can I say it, as the direction that you take. This should guide your direction. When are we working in the right direction? When are we not working in the right direction? And always bearing in mind that you should try to avoid the worst case scenario that you'll come up with. So you have probably, of course, I think a number of scenarios. One is the best, one is the worst. You have to try to make sure that you go mostly in the direction that you actively contribute to shaping the best case scenario. That is the thing about foresight studies in a way. You try to foresee something that will happen in the future, but the future doesn't yet exist. So you're actually shaping the outcomes in a way by the decisions you take already now. These are policy decisions. It's also even the way you look at it in your foresight approach will, in one way or the other, contribute to shaping the outcomes. So it's important to have the right mindset in that regard. I don't know if there's really a best practice in this regard, but I think that it is about trying to be as objective as possible in making these educated guesses, which very educated guesses, but nevertheless educated guesses, which foresight studies are. I think that's a very interesting one, because I think in a way the jury is still out on that one. What is clear to me, at least, is that it was neither the worst case scenario nor the best case scenario that came out. It was somewhere in the middle. The worst case scenario would have been that the pandemic had turned out to be far more deadly than it actually was. It was deadly enough, which was bad, but it was not as deadly as was in some of the original, predictions about how this would pan out. And that had in the beginning we were not really aware of how much is this, how long is the virus going to stay with us, how long is the pandemic going to impact our lives. And I think that there was a fear that many people would die quickly. Thank God it was not as many as one could have feared. But it had a huge impact on society, which no one had foretold. I mean, you look at the economic downside to the pandemic. That will take years to recover from, not just the health aspects, but also the economic downside to it, and the way that And I think that was not foreseen, though that would have been, in a way, perhaps one of the interesting things is how it has changed the way we function. A lot of people now work from home instead of going to the office, or if you're not working in a factory or in a place where you need to be there, you can work from home. And a lot of people do that, many, many more than before the pandemic. But the pandemic changed that approach. That was not foreseen, but it was an outcome of it. And I think it just means that we have to really, if we can learn anything from it, I think it should really be like, we need to take into account all the different aspects that go into shaping the future, which are not just the ones that are the most obvious, but also a lot of others that follow from decisions that we take, which we cannot directly maybe foresee right away, but they have an impact. When you ask people to stay at home, they might find out they can actually work from home, as an example, and then that will change the way we are working and for decades to come, I think.